the agenda. It's accepted. Approval of the minutes. Did anybody have a chance to review and make comment on minutes from the last meeting of July 10th?
Seemed okay.
Yeah, I took a quick glance. I didn't look at them really closely, but everybody okay with the minutes? We'll go with again, a thumbs up with those. We're good. All right.
Yep.
Public comment period. Anybody with us in the? I can't see the whole room, but I know there was Dan was off to the side, so I couldn't see him. Any other people in the public that want to make comments? Anybody online? Anybody in the audience?
I have nobody online. Did you want to make a comment?
Don't be shy, Dan.
Yeah, I wanted to say something. So thanks. I'll just come in so I can. I'm Dan Demerit. I'm Page Place in Orono, and I'm a member of the town council. I shared with Mitch and Clint DeShan earlier this week a Wall Street Journal story about that focused on Ashland and the challenges they're having with municipal government, but in Ashland, Maine, and in Aroostook County with the demographic problem. And we've been talking a lot in Orono about our response to like a public safety initiative around traffic and infrastructure enforcement education, and there'll be more on that. We'll launch it in August, but it's kind of a multi-agency, multi-department initiative. And the reason I think about it is because the Orono is Maine's second youngest community, and arguably right after, I always pop quiz people, it's right after Castine, which has a similar dynamic. They've got a college. It's a big part of their population, and Orono's just bigger. And so we're the second youngest community in Maine by a lot. We are arguably, and I think it's a pretty easy argument, the kind of the center of young talent initiative and energy and kind of human capital with the state's flagship and research university in our community. And I think about how I'm excited about how this process, I'm not excited about the challenges that communities like Ashland face. And I mean, we face them somewhat too, but I'm not excited about that. But I'm excited for us in this process in terms of how we really lean into what are the competitive advantages we have as a community, what differentiates us as a community in terms of having access to young people and being a community where that can be an attraction point for us, because that's kind of the resource that is very hard to replace for other communities across the state. And we have that here. And what is it about what we'll do together as a community as we plan as a town with the university? And we've just opened the Tyler Technologies building. And is that a sign, or is that a harbinger of things we can do? I think they're here because of access to our population and the programs at the university. Is that a harbinger of what we can do together as part of this process? If we're really being strategic about where Maine's headed, we know where it's headed, and how we can position ourselves as a livable community with access to the university. So I just wanted to share that. And as you're doing this hard work, that's something I'll be thinking about in terms of how we advance the conversation with the community when we get to that part of the process, and then ultimately with the council. So thank you for your work, and happy to be here.
Thanks, Dan. Any other comments? Nobody online?
That was all I had.
Yeah. Oh, come on, Dan.
Feels well to be council. Yeah.
Nobody else.
All right. Well, Isabel, I'm going to turn it over to you. I do appreciate people sticking with this. Again, it's going to be a long process, but again, if you can't make meetings, please just let us know. And people have been doing a good job of that, so we do appreciate that. That gives us an idea who's all going to be here. We do want to have a quorum. It does appear we're a little light this evening, but please do your best. I know it's summer, but we really value your input. So with that, Isabel, I'm going to turn it over to you again. We have 3 chapters this evening, so we have a busy night, 2 speakers, as I understand it. So Isabel, you're up.
So I'm joined by Megan Mazzella, our Parks and Recreation Director. A lot of the issues and actually all of the issues and opportunities that are in this chapter really were born out of a pretty lengthy conversation that we had about sort of current needs and the understanding of current needs in the community. There's also a lot of just recreation data in that section that I would encourage you to look at if you hadn't already before this meeting. I'll hit on the issues and opportunities as we sort of understand them currently. So one of the main things that I wanted to highlight was as both an issue and an opportunity is that a lot of our town-owned trails lack formalized trailheads or parking areas, and they aren't really connected to sidewalks. And I have, we go. I have a map on the next screen that shows that. So the orange areas are sidewalks and then the green are trails. And especially, you know, as you're getting further outside of downtown, going, you know, towards Kelly Road and the VZ Town line, you start to kind of see that sidewalks drop off. We still have a lot of trail areas, but they become a little bit less interconnected to the rest of the community. And then obviously the trail system up here is quite disconnected from the community. You would have to drive to that at this point in time. So
Isabel, just quick question on that graphic. I noted that in the packet, but the darker orange, is that sidewalks on both sides? What is that? There's the darker orange, then there's a lighter orange. So I'm just curious.
Oh, like this orange here, it's unfortunately sort of just the base map. So the base map provides like darker red for more intensely used streets. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks.
But there are two shades of orange, I think, which is there's a yellow highlighted, there's like an orange highlighted on top of Main Street.
Yeah, Main Street, Park Street, College Ave, all are a little bit darker red, and that's just the base mapping issue. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
No differentiation, at least intentionally.
Okay.
So I think I sort of started to get to this point when they aren't necessarily connected to sidewalks or the rest of the pedestrian amenities in the community. The trails end up really functioning as more like neighborhood walking paths rather than a formalized interconnected piece of the transportation system. Additionally, our town-owned trails themselves are not very user-friendly. People are frequently getting lost. And the Trails Committee, which is the town committee sort of tasked with looking at trails and doing some trail planning, have indicated that they want to understand areas of trails that are currently difficult to traverse, which I'm told is a lot of the areas, and then better understand the width of trails, identify or eliminate spur trails, which I'll talk about more in a second, and then create more accurate maps of the trail systems. So that's the other thing I just want to highlight with the maps in this section. They are the town's GIS maps, but they're probably in some cases not 100% accurate to on the ground conditions. And we're aware of that internally. So there's also sort of an issue with just trying to have a more clear understanding of maintenance standards for these trails. So trails that are used most frequently should ideally be higher, better maintained, more highly maintained, and be a more interconnected part of the transportation system. Whereas these trails that are sort of on the outskirts of the community or they're going through active conservation areas might serve better by being, you know, less maintained, a little bit more in their natural state. So an opportunity comes in with trail management planning. Actual formal plan would undertake the kind of analysis that the Trails Committee is looking for and would end up providing a framework for the management of what are supposed to be in Orono multi-use trails, and then recommend maintenance standards that the Parks and Recreation Department can utilize moving forward. A second issue is sort of these informal trails, or spur trails in many cases. So there are many trails throughout Orono that are used by the community, but aren't formally recognized by either the town or Orono Land Trust, which is another major owner and maintainer of trails in the community. Because there are just no rights to maintain those trails, OLT or the town doesn't have an easement or ownership rights. They don't maintain those. So I'm told that Parks and Recreation is frequently getting calls about why aren't you maintaining this trail? And it's not something that's owned or maintained by the town. Town doesn't have any legal right to use it. Some of these are spur trails, which are sort of trails that were maybe created by residents just for their own use, trees felled and things like that, just to connect to trails from maybe their backyard. And then some of these trails are like longer trails that have been in use for many years, and they are currently allowed by the private property owner, but there aren't any formalized access easements or any formal easements at all over those trails. Obviously, that ends up posing an issue if the landowner changes and the new owner decides not to allow access. And then also property owners, in some cases in Orono, do allow the trail to cross their property, but they don't allow that portion of the trail to be listed on any maps, which ends up limiting both accessibility for people who aren't, you know, in the know about these trails, but also can create some pretty major safety issues when emergency response services aren't aware of trails or they're not, you know, publicly mapped. And then the final thing I wanted to highlight is just a general lack of toilet facilities. This doesn't seem like a huge issue compared to some of those trail management issues that I touched on, but I do want to note that when you don't have any public toilets, it really limits how long people can reasonably use the town's recreational facilities before having to leave to seek restrooms. There are no permanent public toilets like with plumbing at any town facilities. Webster Park, Gould's Landing, and Brownies Park do have seasonal porta potties that are put in place, but the remainder are sort of suffering from a lack of toilet facilities.
Are we calling the new center at Caribou Bog a town-owned facility? That does have a public plumbed toilet in it when the facility is open.
That's not like owned or maintained by you, right?
It's not owned or maintained by the town. It is owned by partly by the land trust and partly by another entity at the moment. So
right.
In terms of issues and opportunities, that's all I really had to highlight, but I invited Megan here just to answer any other questions you have, either about the data presented or if you want her to dive into any additional details about any of the issues that I mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, there was an awful lot of information presented in your packet, Isabel. So I hope folks had a chance to read that. But I've got just a comment. First off, I want to ask: do we want to let Megan? Did you have any presentation, Megan? What was the intent? I just want to clarify that.
So I met with Isabel prior, so I don't have a formal presentation. Okay. All of the information she shared was something that was done collaboratively. Yeah.
Got it. So I'd like to stress the trails portion, and then also get Gail's perspective since she's here, because I think Orono is really fortunate to have such a good partner in the land trust and all of the great work they do. But when I looked at the chapter and you talked about, you know, the trails committee, that kind of thing, you have such an outstanding partner in the land trust. It'd be nice to not duplicate efforts, or, you know, perhaps we could bolster, you know, what they're doing, that kind of thing. And, you know, I just look at other models across the state. I spend a fair bit of time in the Harpswell area, and they just have an outstanding land trust down there. Harpswell Islands Land Trust, you know, just parking lots, a lot of the issues you identified in the chapter, Isabel, you know, when I think of that Harpswell Land Trust, they have a lot of that nailed down. You know, just recently I noticed another just really well-constructed parking lot, ample spaces, good signage, all those kinds of things. So I just wondered if you could elaborate on, I guess, the town's partnership with the land trust, you know, hear your perspective, Megan, and then I'd also like to hear Gail's perspective, seeing as she's been just a member of a valued member of that land trust for a long time now. So a couple of questions, please.
I think where the relationship shines is the land trust has so many experts. They have so many people that are part of their volunteer group that know a lot about conservation, land management, even construction of bridges, engineering, things like that, things that the town sometimes has access to depending who's on staff and sometimes does not. So it is really helpful when we do find an issue. I know I can call the land trust and say, hey, this bridge went out. How do I fix it the right way? How do I fix it from a trails perspective? And they will come sometimes with notes, sometimes with help. I know our public works department has bigger trucks that when they need help, they can call us and we can deliver. So it's very collaborative. I think we both have our roles where we can help each other. The other thing that is really unique that we have is their office is in one of the town buildings. They share our facilities. We don't charge them. They have access to internet. So that resource for them is important and it just adds to the collaboration.
One of those rooms, one of the rooms of the two rooms that we have has a big sign machine. So we can assist by making signs.
Where I get concerned, and I know this isn't a current concern by the current people at the table, but where I get concerned is we do rely very heavily on the land trust as the town. Our public works department does not have the bandwidth to maintain the trails every single season, every single time something happens. So we do rely on their stewardship and their help. And if for some reason they were not able to provide that, or that would be challenging. And I don't think we're at that point. I don't think there's any concern whatsoever, but to me, it's a reality that people change and organizations change, and it's not a guaranteed constant. So that as right to be a good friend, you have to maintain what you have and give what you can. And if we're constantly taking, I get worried about that. And I think right now we have a collaborative. Right now it's very collaborative, but I worry that if something were to change 10 years from now, what that would look like for both parties. So to make sure that at the least is continued collaboration and continued support, it would be crucial to both entities' success.
Yeah. The average age of the land trust members and the active ones is getting up there. So when you talk about 10 years from now, that could be an issue. Yeah. Gail, what is? Oops.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to, Gail, your perspective on.
There are many different areas. You're right. There are many areas that have preserves that are easements or whatever that people can walk on. They are considered kind of neighborhood areas because people go out their back door. Most of them have trails from their backyard into that particular preserve. I don't know if we need parking lots at every single one of them, that might be working well. And Orono has a lot of dead-end streets and the preserves at the end of the dead-end street. If there's a cul-de-sac, people can park there and whatnot. So, and facilities, so many of these are 1 mile, maybe 2 miles. And I think that works for most people, but it is a concern. The biggest facility by far is the Caribou Bog Conservation Area. And that's growing all of the time. And that does have an outdoor center. It's got, as Eric said, there is an indoor bathroom, there's an outside bathroom. There's 8 to 10 miles of trails out there. And it's a all season spot. There is big parking area there. And parts of it are closed off for conservation and most of it is open for recreation.
Yeah, it would seem, again, and this is from the last comp plan, we identified the recreation as such a key component of what we were trying to do. And in the 10 years since we adopted that plan, we've made great strides. So the Caribou Bog Center is a success story. Then the lunchtime loop and the pocket park by the Stillwater River near down from Marsh Island Brewing. There's some real success stories. I'm just trying to think of how we could expand on that. Just improve those amenities, because they're a draw, for this community. We heard that 10 years ago, and we've had great improvements. The Caribou Bog Center is just outstanding. The parking lot in the wintertime, when you get some good snow, it's really impressive. So again, as part of this comp plan, I would think we'd want to come up with ideas to expand on that and support that to make sure that it's sustainable over the long haul, and then somehow advertise it, because people want to come.
What we need to do, I think, is also, there's a lot of people from Ellsworth, Belfast, Winterport that come. If they're coming up to ski, we need to somehow advertise all our excellent restaurants and breweries that are available for people.
So, any other questions, comments from other folks? I've got a bunch, but I don't want to do all the talking. So,
I have one. So we're talking about the issues and opportunities with trails, but the chapter addresses programs and facilities. Are we going to be addressing those issues and opportunities as well?
So I addressed a little bit of it in the public facilities one with the changes in demographics. I think that, like, in terms of programming, and maybe you can jump in here, from our conversation, what I was getting is that there's a lot of programming, perhaps even too much programming for children right now. Like they're almost over extended.
In terms of the rec department as a whole, our heavy saturation is in children's programming, to the point where recently we've experienced folks reaching out to us saying, sorry, I can't participate in X because I already chose like Z, Y, and A, and I can't do all the things you're offering. So I have started to encounter that a little bit.
We've done an assessment to see if we're meeting the needs and if we are doing too much of one thing but not enough of another. And I mean, I guess those are my concerns, because I mean, as a mom in the community, like, of course, that's all you ever hear is what's available for children.
And I think,
and so I just wondering, have we done an assessment with the participants who are parents and children who are involved in the programs to say, are we meeting the needs? Are we solving a problem with our programs, or are we programming for the sake of programming?
Right. And I think coupled with that, I am not the only entity that runs programming. So what else do you do? What do you do at the schools? What do you do at the Y? What are you getting from other places? So I don't have a collection of the surrounding opportunities at the ready, but I can absolutely pull data from the rec that we do have and start that conversation with rec, what I have kind of control over from the rec perspective. Where there isn't a lot of programming is more community style, family style programming that could look like events. We've had some bike events recently, collaborative bike events that have been kind of all ages and inclusive. So looking at more community style programming, senior citizen style programming, that's a heavy population in this town as well. So looking at my department and filling those other buckets rather than overflowing an existing bucket is something that we are starting to look at as well in terms of that type of programming. Does that help to answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have
I'm just kind of curious of the whole picture of.
Do you have like anecdotal, like, I guess from the nature of your question, I was curious, like, are you hearing that it's too much? Are you hearing that it's not enough? Are you hearing somewhere in the middle?
Not necessarily. I mean, you can't really take an opinion of a person or a few people as fact. That's kind of why I was looking at a global assessment kind of idea that, what is what does it say? What are we saying, hearing across the board?
Yeah.
Because every parent has an opinion.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean that that opinion is correct.
And in some of those opinions and in some of those wants, what I hear sometimes, not all the time, is that kind of next level of sports. You have the rec style sports. Not to say that adding more sports is the answer, but it's not possible because I run out of physical space to host such a thing. With rec events, with school events, there's only so many spaces around to host those types of things and to host it at the time when people want it. I could run basketball in July, but it's not going to have the same heat that it would have, you know, in basketball season. So having that facility, having that space available when it's wanted is sometimes, it's not as if I don't have access. The schools have been, you know, very generous. It's their space. They are their own entity, but we do work together and we do work to provide, you know, different things for different kids and different interests. But it is just what it is sometimes.
I think that from the perspective of an adult who's involved with more than just like my own kids, it does feel like when I think about what's available to my 5-year-old, it's like, you know, he's set, right? Like there's so much for him to choose from. But then, you know, we'll field calls from the library, or I'll hear, you know, stories from the library about the kids who are finding lots of ways to cause the bad kind of trouble at the library because they are above the age at which most of the programming is directed, but also, you know, having leisure time to expend in a community that doesn't have like a teen center or a rec center where, you know, those sorts of activities can be organized. And, you know, we are talking a lot at the schools about the lack of connection and the sense that students and kids through their connectivity to technology have sort of lost a sense of what it means to be in a community, lost that high entry point to relationships where, you know, you build a relationship over time and so it's important to you, so you keep it, versus you start talking to somebody online and then 24 hours later you ghost them because who are they and doesn't really matter, and well, that's how all my relationships are now. And so we ran this experiment this winter to try to just give folks a place to connect in a way that crossed generations and age groups and was low stakes. And so we tried to have a pickleball club. And I was really frustrated by how difficult it was to convince folks that this was something that mattered. I got resistance from, you know, colleagues about the use of gym space. I got questions about the degree to which this, you know, met a need when, you know, when we had it, it was something that brought kids from across groups together with teachers, together with community members in a place that was just fun, right? And we were in real time and we were doing something that was active and we were having to communicate. And you know, I have this distinct memory of a student who said, I'm just really glad to be here tonight because this breakup with my girlfriend is hitting me really hard and I just needed to be around people. You know, and for that student, that was that one answer that was articulated in the room, but for how many other people there was it something that was meeting a need? And in my mind, that's distinct from, you know, organized sports, you know, things that, you know, have a longer term commitment, things that involve a certain level of skill. You know, this is something folks could kind of just walk into. And there was a time when the shuffle became, well, now we're going to play at the rec center. But then we immediately had like 50% of the kids who were excluded from that because they didn't have a membership. And the experience of it and the moments that it worked left me with the sense of we need to be doing more of this in a way that is good for community, it's good for well-being, it's good for relationships within the building, it's good for how the kids are doing when they are, you know, left to whatever devices they you know, are left to when they leave school at the end of the day. And I just wonder about the degree to which we can have a like a school community partnership around this. Because in my experience, when it comes to a conversation about how can, you know, the schools and the community work together, there's no entity or individual living in the space between those things to whom those questions can be addressed. And so it's almost like each initiative that involves that collaboration involves the building of a new relationship that is then hinged to the specific initiative that then can't be leveraged in service to all of the other things that would be good for the kids in the community. And so I wonder about having as one of our identified needs a commitment to building a school community partnership that can help meet the need that isn't met because we don't have a rec center to offer kids, that doesn't have lanes that are committed to specific age groups, and that really looks at, you know, the well-being of the community as a whole.
Just to expand on Dan's comment, because he brought that up earlier, we're unique in Orono in that we have the university, and that was my thought is listening to your comments is how can we expand, you know, that university partnership, take advantage of the proximity there. But if according to your comment again, the rec center not having a membership is a hurdle. Is there any way around that? I mean, the rad camps and all the other things that you know read about, and my kids did some of that too when they were younger. But I'm just curious on how we could leverage or expand our partnership with the university, if at all possible, given the facilities and the opportunities that are over there. But
yeah, I mean, we absolutely can. We just have to decide what that would look like.
Yeah. Is there still a gym area in that building by the Alumni Center?
Yes. Langle Gym.
Yeah. Is it used?
Yeah, Langle.
Yeah. It's an academic building now, so that's where kinesiology and physical ed run out of, but it's also used for intramural sports as a reservable space.
Okay.
But you know, and then the dome is back up again. So there are definitely opportunities. And it was great when they're, you know, and I know you have a relationship with Christy also over at the rec center. So we just have to decide what that would look like and what it would cost and if it's feasible. I mean, but there are a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. So like what Meredith is talking about, my brother-in-law, is Catherine speaking to?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
On purpose?
Yeah, we can hear you, Catherine.
A bit loud. I'm in an airport, so. But I just wanted to add that when my kids were young, they did a program called GAC, which was Gardening and Community something, which was a volunteer-led program that did gardening and cooking, that provided meals for the people in the elderly and disabled housing communities around behind Pat's Pizza and around the library. And that was it came out of kind of a rec after school program and turned into kind of a volunteer led program, but it really was an incredible connector on many levels, right? It like gave kids a lot of opportunities to learn about nutrition and their neighbors and giving back. And I mean, those are the kind of things that I think, Meredith, you're speaking to that would be really, would really enhance what offerings are. So I don't know if anybody remembers that program or anything, or it was run by a woman that lives in Pat Bears.
I can hear you very well.
Okay.
We're losing you.
I'm sorry.
I think the beginning was about a volunteer gardening club that someone had put together a number of years ago. And that was sort of building the generational partnerships that we had been discussing previously.
So my brother-in-law and his family live in Lincoln. And this issue was present up there, and there was also a drug issue with teens in town. So he and his family started something called the Warehouse, which was it's a nonprofit teen center. It's been really successful. I think the reason it's successful is because it's close to the school, and it offers a really diverse range of activities. Kids can go in and play Nintendo or watch movies. They can play ping pong. There's a basketball court. Sometimes the ping pong courts get turned into pickleball. But that's the kind of thing I think that could work really well. I think if you set up a facility that's further from the school and it's just basketball, or you name the activity, really going to close down like this type of interactive, get teens all in one place, like enjoying building community together. I don't know where that place would be. Like my initial thought would be like either at the school, that would be really great. The Keith Anderson Community Building. I'm not really sure what's going on over there at the moment, but that second floor facility could work. And potentially the library, which is building a teen center. And I think the issue with the library right now is that the libraries are quiet places, and teens after school, like that's the last thing they want to do is be quiet. They've been quiet all day long. So I love that idea. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to make it happen, whether it's a nonprofit like volunteer from the community, or if it's a formal thing that Parks and Rec and schools can actually facilitate the production of. I have a few other points too, after we resolute this one.
I think to summarize some of the things that we've heard over the years as well from the town for addressing the kind of teen-ish population there, and you hit on it with the pickleball example as well. The library, that space is a safe space. It's supervised, but you still have some freedom versus signing up for a program that's very linear. So it's really attractive to that age group. Parents feel safe about kids walking to the library because it is a safe space, or going to a school activity because there's people they know there, but teens still have that bit of freedom. So I completely agree, having a space that is welcoming, that there are other options, not linear programming, but also moderately supervised. There's people around. It's for both the public, the parents of those teens, and if they do need something, like your example of just a conversation help that one student, but sometimes that more neutral space, that safe space can be really helpful. Even not just for biding time, but for that connection. But I think those are key points when thinking of a space like that, is, safe, close, and welcoming for that population.
I'm gonna ask Dan DeMerit a question too. With the repurposing or the discussions on Keith Anderson, Birch Street School, and others, have the council members discussed these kinds of potential uses during those discussions? I haven't followed all those meetings carefully, but is there any chat about that?
Yeah, we just talked about it at our meeting on Monday, and made Megan stay till the very end to give us an update on the pool, which wasn't very courteous of us. We won't do it again, but we talked about we're talking about forming a facilities work group to look at the different projects. We were looking at particularly the public safety building was one where we've had a lot of interest and discussions. We've had a hard time kind of coming to a consensus on what the right approach is and what we can afford. And so we as we were completing our search for a town manager, we now have our town manager on board. We now have a new public works and facilities director on board, and hopefully we'll have an offer out to a new fire chief in August. So as we talked about it on Monday, we talked about waiting for the the fire chief to get started, and then putting together a work group where we take a look at all of these facilities and have a conversation. We are having kind of a side conversation about the old fire station in the Webster neighborhood, in terms of there's been an interest in troops, Boy Scout troops use it. There's an interest in creating a recreation library for people to use skates and skis and stuff like that. So we're having a side conversation on that, but we are going to have that conversation. We'll be having it in the context of the other investments and the costs, because we've got a big outlay, a commitment to the library already that's going to leverage millions of federal dollars and philanthropic dollars. We're looking at the Route 2 corridor project, which would cost millions of dollars, bring a multitude, almost an order of magnitude more investment into Orono on top of what the local investment would be, but it would still be millions of dollars locally. So I think that work group is going to end up having a couple of counselors, a couple of staff members, and then perhaps members of the community who know a thing or two, who have some experience in the space and can help us really do an assessment of what the critical needs are and what we can do from there.
Dan,
Right.
I thought that was just done. Like,
well, we've paid engineers to do a lot of, analysis of the buildings. And so we had all 4 of the buildings got, the group out of Brewer, which said
Haley Ward.
Haley, yeah, that's the one. Ms. Bell knows. Haley Ward did a nice kind of presentation, packet for us, but we still have to, and we've been looking at more detailed stuff on the public safety building, but haven't been able to, as a council, kind of coalesce around a path forward, given the cost of what that could be.
Yeah, I just wouldn't want to lose any opportunities because these discussions are quite good, and you hear some of the concerns, finding an area for teens to gather. And again, I agree, proximity or close by to the school, like Eric and Meredith are talking, that would be very valuable. Just don't want to miss any opportunities if you're deciding on this, as we discuss the comp plan. So just understand the need. That's why it helps having council members listen in on these meetings. So
sure.
Phil,
I'm sorry, Laura. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry, Laura.
I just want to be mindful of time. Phil, Maddie Jensen from VAX is here for transportation.
All right. So there's a lot to talk about. Parks.
We have other comments regarding recreation. What should we do, Phil?
All right, here. So we have 3 chapters to cover right now. We've got an hour and a quarter. So, and I do want to be respectful of our guest speakers. So would we be okay transitioning to the next chapter so that we can make use of Back's time and then perhaps come back to this and revisit? Because I have several things I'd love to bring up, but does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Let's go with that then. Isabel, we okay with that?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I don't have much for public facilities, and I think that tied in here to this conversation too. So if we want to come back, we can.
Okay, let's leave some time. I doubt we'll have a ton of the public comment period at the end. So hopefully we can maybe just revisit some of these issues with recreation. There's a lot to talk about. And again, we'll have other opportunities with public meetings and such, but yeah, so lots of cool things to talk about. All right, transition to transportation.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm joined by Maddie Jensen from VAX, that's the Bangor Area Comprehensive Transportation System. Yes. So a lot of the chapter is, while some of Orono's needs are met on a local level, a lot of our, especially vehicular transportation needs and public transit needs are really more of a regional issue. So I invited VAX to talk about that, but also because a lot of their active transportation plans for the region and, a lot of the work that they're doing are directly informing some of the work that was identified in this chapter. So with that, I'll just run through the issues and opportunities as I see them at this point, and would love your feedback or any questions that you have for Maddie about transportation, regional transportation, anything like that. So in terms of an opportunity, I had indicated that the adoption of a complete streets policy would be very helpful for Orono, but also this was a recommendation of 3 different plans, 2 local and 1 regional. So the downtown traffic and circulation study was something that Sebago Technics, I believe, put together in 2017 for the town. It was really focused on a lot of active transportation stuff, but also gave some general engineering recommendations to make really downtown safer for pedestrians and cyclists. And then the Orono Pedestrian Safety Action Plan was a collaborative effort in 2020, finished in 2021 with Maine DOT, the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, and the town. And that provided some sort of general recommendations, but then some more site-specific recommendations as well. One of their general recommendations was the adoption of a complete streets policy. This policy would ensure that proposed improvements to public streets would be designed to work for essentially all people in all modes of transportation, so cyclists, motor vehicles, pedestrians, and those that use public transportation. And I also should note that this was recommended by Penobscot Climate Action, which was our regional climate action plan that was completed earlier this year, and which Orono played a big part in those stakeholder conversations. So a complete streets policy is just sort of a general policy that the council would need to adopt that would define the cost threshold at which including facilities for pedestrians and cyclists in like roadway improvements is not feasible. So the Bicycle Coalition of Maine in that pedestrian safety action plan encourages municipalities to explicitly include those things when doing so accounts for no more than 20% of a project's total cost. In general, the policy would also provide some information around, you know, what we consider to be a complete street on our local level and the improvements that we would like to see as a community included in those things. So that would sort of explicitly apply to the Public Works Department and Council as they're making those decisions on whether or not to fund projects and at what level. And then we talked about this a little bit at the end of our last meeting, but I think it really ties into the transportation issue and also a lot of the goals and issues that we've been discussing previously. So I noted as an opportunity shared parking arrangements. It was noted at the last meeting that parking in the town's lots is not currently allowed overnight. And there are many private lots located within 1,000 feet of the downtown area, sort of the central of the downtown, which I considered like in front of Pad Pizza, which are unused at night. So I think that in terms of getting housing where we want it, getting some mixed use amenities where we want it, there could be an opportunity for coordination between the town or private landowners to allow for overnight parking in lots that are essentially just sitting empty at night. That ends up saving costs associated with the development of housing in the downtown area, and obviously leads to less use of valuable land in a pretty valuable area of the community. The other thing that could be considered is parking alternatives could be offered in some cases. So, you know, where a shared parking agreement would meet the needs of multiple uses, office down here that only works until 4:30 or 5 could then be used by people who live downtown. Or if a satellite lot could be made available to accommodate a portion of the parking requirement. That's a little bit more for commercial uses where they can allow their employees to sort of carpool in, but that could be a good opportunity. Or where a parking demand study verifies that there's reduced demand for vehicle parking. So a lot of land uses, especially residential land uses for seniors would be an example that I would bring up, really don't use a lot of vehicle parking. And so our standards are probably excessive for those kinds of uses. People don't usually drive that often. They want to live in a place that they can walk at that point in their life. So we could do some sort of allowance for a parking demand study to allow alternatives. Now, this would all usually come in at the planning board review process. And currently our ordinance allows commercial uses in the downtown to essentially not provide off-street parking. They can meet their minimum parking requirements by showing that those spaces are available in the existing downtown lots, but residential uses do not have that ability in our village commercial district, which is this area just out here. And then the final issue and maybe opportunity that I brought up is just a general continued investment in transportation planning and improvements. So, you know, it was mentioned that we have this major Route 2 corridor project that has a lot of public engagement right now and a lot of political will. And I'm saying that both at the local level, but also at the state level to actually sort of fund these major transportation investments. As you'll see in the chapter, we've already also done a lot of transportation planning in the community. Those plans were already adopted. And, you know, the Route 2 corridor project and a lot of the recommendations of those plans are sort of, can be fairly costly to develop and implement those. So potentially some sort of town-wide active transportation study or further information around prioritization is needed that would end up synthesizing and prioritizing those needs. And then I also just want to note that obviously we've put a lot of effort into this planning for Route 2 corridor and the downtown and some of these other major places, to the detriment of some of our other neighborhoods where, you know, sidewalks are crumbling and there are some major needs. So some sort of study around active transportation would end up focusing on where the need is also greatest. Regardless of all of that, it is clear that continued investment in transportation infrastructure is needed to ensure high quality of life. We have a lot of great planning documents that have been completed, but need further investment and really prioritization of those investments, as we were just discussing. That's what I have for transportation at this point. If there are questions about the chapter, I can answer those. If there are questions about regional transportation, you can answer those. And actually, maybe do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Maddie. As you introduced me, I work for BACS, a shorter than Bangor Area Comprehensive Transportation System. And yeah, we are federally designated to assist this region with transportation planning and coordination amongst the towns and with the state main DOT. So we have a number of some funds that we get every year formula to conduct planning studies at a regional level, but also we can provide technical assistance at the local level. I know in the last few years, we've done a couple, you know, small scale policies or studies for the town of Orono specifically, based on whatever needs staff have come to us with. So we're always excited and happy to provide assistance.
Are you working on the Route 2 project?
I am not, no. One of my colleagues is working on that in the VPI project.
I have a question, and thank you for joining us this evening. When you look at the chapter and you look at all the studies, you had a nice summary of those, Isabel, and then you reference having a new study, and a new study is likely going to say, yeah, adopt complete streets policy. I'm just looking around, everybody's fairly new. I don't know if Mitch, if he's available, could provide any perspective from the town, you know, the previous councils as to what those discussions centered on, because it started in 2017. That was one recommendation, then there's another one subsequent to that, and then the climate action plan all mentioned the complete street policy. So clearly that seems to be a need, and there's an interest for it, but I'm just curious on, you know, I understand there's a cost involved, but, you know, what has there been any progress, any momentum for adopting that? Because any new study we do to synthesize all that is going to mention that same policy. So I'm just curious on that. I don't know if Mitch can comment, or in lieu of Mitch, Dan, if you have any information. But you're relatively new, so.
Not to put you on the spot, Mitch isn't in the room, Phil, so I might have to put you on the spot if you don't mind, or if you don't have any insight here.
No, I don't have a lot. I know that one of the challenges, we talked about the Route 2 corridor committee meeting at we had a meeting in this room last Wednesday. We had a prior meeting in February, and the consultant is now charged with bringing us about a final concept based on what they've heard. We had we've charged Clint Deshan, our town manager, to come back to us with a timeline in terms of how we move forward assessing the project. And we've had but one of the key challenges for the Route 2 corridor project is people don't have a lot of awareness about the work that's been done previously. I had a few people give me kind of a briefing on the planning studies that have happened prior to my time on the council in Orono, so that was helpful. But there's been a lot of work done, and we talked about the why is like safety, public safety, pedestrian safety, bike safety, traffic calming. Why are those such key priorities, you know, in terms of what the consultants have brought back to us? And there's been feedback as part of the earlier hearings, but also this prior work that's been done in the planning that point in those directions. And I think the complete streets is a pretty good example of designing infrastructure for everybody. So that's why that's come back. So All right, we got it. There goes VZ, I think.
Yep.
So that's kind of where we're at. Is we will have, and I think that when we do this timeline, Clint has this timeline, and Mitch will be involved in it. Mitch just got promoted, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, he's now the assistant town manager and economic development director. So he's a more complete staffer, I suppose. But we just did that on Monday too. But I think it would make a lot of sense, if you're up for it, Phil, to bring that discussion in here too. If you want to be a part of it, if you want a briefing on kind of where we're going with the Route 2 work and how it, I think that could be helpful. So I'm sorry I don't have a more complete answer on Complete Streets, but
to build on Complete Streets, the other question would be a Vision Zero policy. And I know Bax has just started thinking about this, but we don't have to wait for Bax as a town. Orono could lead the way and adopt Vision Zero. And Vision Zero, for those who don't understand or who haven't heard of that, goes along with Complete Streets, but it's really bolstering it in such a way that we're doing our utter best to ensure zero traffic fatalities. And so it's a commitment to making the infrastructure so good that no one will die.
I can just build on that for some more context. We received a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant for about $500,000 to hire consultants to provide a Vision Zero plan for all 11 of BAC's members. So we just signed the contract for that. And so, yes, there's no requirement that Orono waits for this process, but you know, even if you adopted the policy early, you'll still be getting a plan that makes specific recommendations and even some demonstration projects that might be kind of a low entry point to see, you know, what sorts of adjustments might be made on the road to advance that Vision Zero goal. But I think the whole Vision Zero grant process is like a 5-year from start to finish. So it is kind of a longer time horizon. I'll also mention for Complete Streets that we as an organization have been hearing kind of rumblings about an interest from our members to create a regional or local town by town Complete Streets policy. We were sort of encouraged to wait until the state had adopted theirs before creating our own. And so they actually are going to finalize it this September. So we already are talking on our policy committee about adopting a region-wide plan. Again, not something that Orono has to wait for us to do, but we've been hearing it from so many towns in the region that we're hoping to help out with that soon.
Are there any immediate steps, you know, short-term goals from Complete Streets that you could see that might be feasible for us from BAC's perspective?
I think you already have, I think what we've talked about, all the plans that you listed, you already have a lot of plans that make recommendations for safety improvements and actual tangible infrastructure. So from, you know, that perspective, you already have a lot going on. It's more just the implementation that's really difficult. So I guess it's not really a short-term goal, but, you know, a way to implement the recommendations coming out of plans is probably something that I think is lacking throughout the region is, you know, the feasibility and the budget to do that. So
grant funds available to help support this?
There are yeah, there's no BAC's funding for actual construction. There's a lot of transportation funding available right now through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act. And so really it is kind of a matter of the, you know, town staff having the capacity to go after those larger grant funds. We are considering going after a regional application for a major $10 to $20 million EPA grant to do something similar, because we know that it's a bit difficult of a lift for a town the size of Orono or a lot of the towns in the region to go after a major federal grant. But there are a number of opportunities. It's just kind of a matter of having the capacity to go after them.
So then do these projects come forward? Can they come, I mean, are they, does someone have a list in these plans about what are projects that make Main Street or Forest Ave or, you know, a complete street, or how does that?
So I can speak to that a little bit. In this chapter, I've essentially attempted to summarize the recommendations of all of these planning documents. I think the one, and so a lot of it has been around because, as you noted, it has been a priority for this community, pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. So in that way, more of a complete street. There are some fairly, if you're going through this section of the document, some fairly low-hanging fruit, like installation of the rapid flashing beacons and some of these, smaller investment projects that, again, in my mind, is more low-hanging fruit. Then obviously there's major engineering and infrastructure improvements that would be eligible, better suited for grants and eligible for grants. So we do have a list. We're aware of the projects that have already been recommended, and a lot of that is just working with Public Works to come forward in the budget process on an annual basis. So they've, I noted in this chapter, have started working on a lot of these things, like some of it has been funded through their budget request this year. Then there are a variety of other things that have not been funded that would need to come forward at a later date.
Sure. Yeah. So that could be a nice part of the Orono Stops initiative in terms of the infrastructure piece. And it would be great to see those things come forward as part of the capital planning budget and stuff like that. Thank you for the work on that.
I think also being like visionary with the projects that we're recommending, like BACS historically, we get projects submitted to us for consideration for funding through Maine DOT. And historically, we have a very grounded, group of towns who only submit projects that we reasonably expect to be funded, that we think reasonably would be, prioritized amongst the whole region or amongst, throughout the state. But I think we've been hearing from the state and from the federal government with all of these grants coming out that we need to be thinking bigger. Like realistically, maybe those projects won't happen next year or the year after in 5 years, but we need to have those ideas built out already, not just, okay, we're going to resurface this road because we have to maintain it, but if we're resurfacing this road and extra money is available, let's add this or do this. It's good to be fiscally constrained, but I think it also can kind of limit what we're able to do and what we think is possible.
An issue that I've seen many towns kind of fall into the trap of, kind of going off with that point, is frankly, infrastructure maintenance costs are so expensive that they never really get around to those kind of visionary projects. We are lucky enough in Orono to already have this documented in planning documents, which makes us especially eligible for grants when those have already been sort of identified priorities of the community. So I think it's just, being visionary, going for grants, understanding what might be available to us.
I thought an interesting statistic, just for those of you new members, but I recall in the last comp plan process, I'm pretty sure this was the case, that Orono was we had the second highest percentage of non-vehicular transportation, in the state. I think Bar Harbor was ahead of us, but that number stuck out at me. And Dennis Cross, you were on the committee. I don't know if you remember that, but that situation was really important to me. It's clear that this town values other forms of transportation, and again, it was brought up 10 years ago in the comp plan. Nothing's changed. So some improvements have been made. I know trying to reconfigure Ferry Hill to allow for a little bit wider bike lane going up up the hill, both directions, but so there's been subtle improvements, but with that percentage of alternative transportation, we need to do a better job. So somehow with this comp plan process, it'd be really nice to put forward some measures that are feasible and can make a difference. Other questions for our BACS?
What are some of the safety things that we can do? I'm thinking of Taylor Road. The trail crosses Taylor Road, and there's no visibility, none.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what we can do when traffic goes 60 to 70 miles an hour down that road, comes over the hill, and there's people. And there's where it's a ski area, and the high school ski team goes out there to practice, to come out, and you have to sit and count to 12 or something to make sure that it's safe to come out. But I don't know if there's flashing lights or something that can be done to take an intersection that's so heavily used and so visible.
That's
it's an issue driving, not just on a bike or walk.
Yeah, bikes go back and forth, and walkers go back and forth.
Can be really dangerous as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen lights at other intersections like that give the Taylor Road or the people coming from Bangor on the railroad tracks like a green light when it's clear uphill. That kind of system. Putting something that would slow traffic down as they head towards Bangor down Forest Avenue so that they're not going 60 miles an hour. Maybe something like a speed bump. People love driving over
a few
them.
more. Yeah. We got 2 more coming.
Yeah, I mean the speed tables, on Forest Ave, in front of your house or near your house, Gail, and there's a couple there. I look at what Brunswick has done. Yeah, what Brunswick has done, right in their main street, where all the traffic goes, 4 lanes of traffic, and they figured out, because in your chapter, Isabel, you talked about sections of Main Street that are 4 lanes wide, and just trying to reduce improve the safety of crossing those long gaps. But Brunswick's model, like they've had them for years. I'm not sure if it's reduced to pedestrian vehicle incidents, something like that. But there's certain other measures that can be done. You don't see a lot of them. Yeah.
Our initiative Phil, is our initiative here right now to just repeat what was done in the past with the comprehensive plan, or should we be like putting items at the top, like this has to happen, like the comprehensive plan recommends that this happens within the next year, within the next 5 years, and like the low-hanging fruit, like Isabel mentioned, like putting in rectangular flashing beacons, putting in speed tables, and not waiting for these large infrastructure projects, which is what we've been doing for the last decade. Right. And now it seems like it's on the cusp of happening, but still, like another decade could go by.
Right. New RFID light at Shadbush in Forest that went in at the end of last week. So it's piece by piece by piece, we try to get them installed. So,
but is it our obligation to enhance the speed at which these things get installed?
That's up to this committee. So again, Eric, and for everybody's benefit, we're taking stock in all things Orono with this first step in the process. And then we're going to hear from a lot of the public, and we're probably going to hear a lot of these same concerns. And then our job after that is to try to, move the ball forward. I don't want to just repeat what we did 10 years ago. We've made some progress, but I'm looking for this plan to move ahead a bit quicker. So if we're identifying low-hanging fruit, Eric, that'll be toward the end of the process when we're proposing solutions. We can throw out ideas because Isabel has provided the issues and opportunities in the chapter. But yeah, that's what I intend to do, is figure out some more critical issues and keep making progress in Orono. And there's a lot of work to do. So
I might be able to add some additional insight. A lot of the prioritization does come at the end of the sort of phase 3 of the process, after we've heard from the public. Obviously, I've presented sort of issues and opportunities as staff see it right now, but I'm sure we'll hear more from the public about what their issues and opportunities are and how those might differ. It will be our job in phase 3 to kind of meld those together and then actually come up with a prioritized list of action strategies. It's all a recommendation to the council, so ultimately it will be up to sort of the community to maintain that advocacy and that political will to get things passed and to get things funded. Our role here will really be to provide actionable, prioritized recommendations for council to consider at the end of this process, essentially, and over the next 10 to 12 years of implementation.
I want to touch on parking for a second. So Isabel mentioned just, within 1,000 feet of the downtown area. And I wanted people to understand that because we talked about that in the last comp plan too. If I remember correctly, Isabel, 1,000 feet was generally the distance that people are willing to walk from their vehicles to a business or any establishment, something like that. So we have, and I remember there was a radius circle with 1,000 feet drawn around the downtown, and a lot of our parking lots are within that space. So the issue even 10 years ago was trying to educate people that there are adequate parking spaces. There's a lot of space around Orono if you're willing to walk more than 10 feet from the diagonal parking, which apparently is a safety issue on Mill Street. But we do have a lot of peripheral parking that I'm not sure we do a great job of as a town of letting people know that. So again, that's one issue. She mentioned the 1,000 feet, but I wanted people to understand where that number came from. And in my opinion, there's still walkable parking spaces. The credit union lot, I'm not sure that the Asa Adams lot, or the town hall lot, but they are within 1,000 feet, and I don't think people utilize those much at all. So other comments on transportation? Any questions for our BAC's representative? She took her time to come here. Any questions for her?
Maddie, is BAC's involved with painting crosswalks at all within our municipality?
No, we're not. Nope, we're more on the planning side. We hear a lot at our policy committee meetings from Public Works, from the towns throughout the region that's a major issue, but we haven't been involved in that in the past. No.
Okay, that's definitely an issue here as well for those who are paying attention to.
I think finding crosswalks, either having the capacity in-house to do it or being able to contract it out is, we've been hearing from all of the towns that there's no one to do it. So I'm not totally sure what the solution to that is. Can I just follow up on that? Is it like winter maintenance or?
Well, there's crosswalks right now that haven't been painted. Like one that pops to mind would be the crosswalk that goes from Webster Park across to the upstream side of the bridge sidewalk that's faded away. And I know we often contract with a company that comes out from Massachusetts, but it's pretty easy to go out there with a bucket of paint and just put it down. I do that with the Bicycle Coalition pretty frequently for work. It's a can of spray paint, and it lasts a season, like a year of driving before getting scraped off by winter plowing. So I think the town could look at alternatives here instead of waiting for the quote professionals to do it.
Yeah, I know that Bangor recently just did a project where they were trying a new technique to see if they could get it to last longer than a season. So that's also something that could be considered. I don't know if that will be successful since they literally just, I think they lowered the area that has the paint so that it won't get scraped by the plows. I think that was in the last few weeks that they did that. So there could be alternative ways to preserve it so that it doesn't have to be done every season.
I have a question on our BAT buses. So the Black Bear Orono Express. So just looking at other options for transportation, again, shuttling. We have the university. One of our challenges in Orono is that gap because university is across the river away from downtown. So, that's a challenge versus somebody like, UNH and, Durham, New Hampshire. I'm in Plymouth right now, Plymouth, New Hampshire, as we speak. And the college is right beside the downtown. So they have it a lot easier. So trying to figure out a way to get students downtown and bridge that gap is a real challenge for Orono. And one of the things, as Isabel mentioned, is our Black Bear Orono Express. So I was curious, Isabel, and even from BAC's perspective, is the ways that we might be able to improve or increase ridership. My wife works at Eastern Maine Community College, and right now she could not take a bus from, she can go from Orono. I mean, the bus goes through our neighborhood, Webster neighborhood, and she can get to the main cog downtown, but then she's got to, make her way over to EMCC. So I'm just thinking about opportunities, alternative transportation, just to, get away from everybody driving a car. So question is, how can we improve that? And I think from BACs, I think you folks must talk about that. And I'm also curious on the current ridership numbers. Isabel or Megan, anybody know what those are like, or ways we might be able to improve that?
I might have to ask you about improvements. And I don't have the data on numbers right off the top of my head, but I think if you give me a second, I could probably find that information quite easily.
Yeah, I have an updated ridership from last year on my phone that I could pull up if you wanted me to for BBOE and Community Connector generally. Orono's in a really unique position in that you have BBOE. It's the bus that you kind of have almost total control over with the university. That's meant to be fast and convenient for university students and Orono residents specifically, whereas Community Connector more broadly serves a much larger region, and the route that Community Connector takes through Orono and Old Town is relatively long and slow. So in terms of creating, more ridership, you could look, it's already pretty convenient and fast in terms of like transit, like standards for, lead times and whatnot, and stop distances. So, I think the biggest barrier I see is just that students don't have to use the bus because they can keep a car on campus or, in their, at their apartment complex. And so if you can do that, why get on a bus, I guess? And that's kind of, I suppose, mostly a like university policy or the policy of the housing complexes for students to allow that or make that easy. Also, I'm not totally sure what the integration or like education is like at the university level to encourage students or educate students on how to use the bus. I guess I'm thinking from my own personal experience when I was in college. During orientation every year, they had, bus ambassadors, and they had programs where they would encourage students to ride the bus just to get them on there the first time. And then after that, it felt a lot easier and more comfortable to do that in the future. I don't know if the university does that or if there's a way to program for something like that to kind of make it feel less daunting for those who have a car but might choose a bus other times. Yeah.
The university comes up in every conversation that we have in here.
Correct. And this seems like an issue opportunity. Yeah.
Can you make this all happen? Sorry, I'm getting cramp. Not gonna say that.
I didn't bring my wand today, so maybe next.
Yeah, but so the university does make it easy for everyone to drive and get a parking pass that's really affordable. And I don't really know that anything is going to change with that traffic system until it becomes less attractive to drive to campus. This is going to go on for decades unless that changes.
Right.
So just as an aside, I went to the University of Southern Maine. We're a split campus. We have a contract with Greater Portland Metro, had a contract with Greater Portland Metro that provides transportation for free to students between the two campuses. And their sustainability department actually was the one that championed sort of not having vehicles on campus anymore. So it became like a policy championed by the sustainability department, but now I think they outlawed it for certain grade levels. Like maybe if you're a freshman, you're not allowed to have something like that since I graduated however long ago at this point, but yeah.
It's a capacity issue right now. We have the capacity for people to have their cars. It's a more attractive for admissions for first year students to have cars because they're not allowed to at a lot of schools. So, it's a yield thing as well. have a parking and transportation committee.
As a freshman.
Yeah, there's a lot of schools who don't allow first-year students to have cars, but and we do because it's what students desire. And they, you know, and we have capacity. So I agree, and we don't do anything to challenge driving because they want it, and we want to provide it if they want it to come here. I mean, admissions is competitive.
Yeah.
I think we had previous conversations about sort of enrollment going down, so I chicken and sort of a scenario has to be considered.
On the other hand, though, like as someone who might want to go to a school, the idea of going to a school where I know ahead of time that it's extremely bikeable and walkable could be a great attraction for a lot of would-be humane attendees.
And we push that in addition to the parking, for sure. I mean, people get tours of the trails and are encouraged to bring their bikes and have bike rooms in all the residence halls and things like that. But it's not one or it's all available. All the opportunities.
Well, other questions, because we still have one chapter to go, and we also talked about perhaps revisiting some of the recreation stuff. So what are people's thoughts? Do we have more questions for Maddie and the Bax folks? What do you think?
I'll just add that I was able to pull up ridership really quick on my phone. It looked like in FY 24, so July 23 to June 24, BBOE specifically was at 17,473 rides for the full year. Community Connector total was 554,724. So it is increasing. We just surpassed 500,000, which we haven't had since before COVID, when we had kind of a pretty substantial dip. Our pre-COVID levels for BBOE was over 37,000 a year, and for Community Connector wide, 775,000. So we're still really recovering from COVID, and that's typical, you know, nationwide to still be seeing lower numbers from that.
Okay.
The addition of BBOE was a specific recommendation of the 2014 plan that clearly was implemented. So lest we forget that there have been some wins.
No, exactly. And that was one of them. And just how can we expand on that? Like Eric's point, do we rely on successes that we had 10 years ago, or do we try to improve things? So it's a challenge, though, is, you know, with the enrollment numbers, and that's a selling point for Humane. Understandable, but just makes things harder to reduce vehicles. So, well,
and Orono has been a huge proponent region-wide for transit. I know, like, previous staff on our transit committee have been the largest voice for supporting transit, expanding it, you know, when necessary. So would of course love for Orono to keep being a voice in that sphere.
Very good. Other questions, or want to move on to the facilities chapter? Are we good?
Good in the room.
All right. Sounds good. I think we're moving on.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining us.
So with regards to public facilities, I kind of touched on this already in the population and demographics section that we reviewed previously. The state asks for some additional specific information around impacts to public facilities with regard to projected growth. So we noted in the population and demographics section that the population is projected to stay approximately steady. I think we were maybe going to grow by about 1,000 people. But demographics are expected to continue to shift, and that is following a trend that we've been seeing for at least the last 2 comp plans, where we are a little bit of an aging community. So we had noted in the population and demographics and the housing section that additional housing units will likely be required to serve that population that's trending towards living alone or in pairs rather than large single-family homes. And then, of course, we discussed that the population is projected to skew older by 2035. so the lifetime of this plan, with the largest growth happening among those 55 and older. And again, that's sort of dependent on new main enrollment. So a lot of our younger population has fluctuated with the enrollment at the university. In that case, water and sewer capacity is frankly more than adequate to accommodate more housing units, at least within the areas where those services are available. I did note in the chapter that there are infrastructure and pipe upgrades that might be necessary, but in terms of like the treatment facilities, those are really the big ticket cost. Those are more than adequate to accommodate additional demand. I think with sewer, we're at a little bit less than 60% of essentially full capacity at the treatment plant right now. Because of a projection in the aging population, changes in emergency response to accommodate the needs of that kind of a population may require increased staffing levels, especially around EMS. They've already been, over the past few years, experiencing an increase in call volume since essentially 2020. So likely will require increased staffing levels. And then kind of going back to the recreation department a little bit, we talked a little bit about the programs that are currently offered for children, but especially if we're trending to skew a little bit older, probably recreation programs geared more toward the older adult population rather than children will be what the department needs to focus on, or at least increase their focus on in the future. And I know that you do a little bit of that now.
Are those programs utilized?
So currently, we really only offer one consistent senior program, which is what we call our coffee hour. It meets in the morning on Tuesdays, and at the end of the month, we try and run some sort of event or trip for that population. They are utilized kind of just as much as other programming are. We get about 10 folks that come consistently. Some days we hit maybe 15 or 20. Some days we're a little bit lower, but you see that same trend in a lot of the other, I would say, like child specialty program. I don't know if that is the best time for that type of program. I've heard kind of things that people might want to see. This senior response was a lot in part of COVID. Prior to COVID, we had a very active historical society. We had a very active Orono Seniors Club. The Birch Street building was very actively used by different groups in that population. And almost all of those groups cease to exist now because the members that participated in COVID can no longer participate, or those leaders are no longer leading those types of programs. So that's where we started. And we need to do, I would say, more data collection to provide that type of thing. I know our biggest issue is there are a lot of folks in the community that would love to attend some of our coffee hour, that similar programming, but they can't get there. They rely on people for groceries, for assistance. So to get to the building, it's not attainable for some of them who can't drive or live on different ends of town, who rely on other people for that service that they need. So we're finding transportation to be a challenge in terms of providing that accessible programming.
I guess and this maybe goes back, Dan, to what I was saying about, I thought the town did kind of assess some of its buildings. Like, it feels like the buildings are very underutilized and the town either needs to do something, like less planning and more doing. Like, if the Birch Street Senior Center isn't being used, the Keith Anderson Center is underutilized, the firehouse, and then we're also saying, we need a teen center, we need this, we need that, but there's no space, or we need more youth stuff and there's no space. Like, somehow, I don't know if it's in this plan, say we want to use X building for X, Y, and Z, but this feels very muddled and inefficient. And like, keeping those buildings up is extremely expensive.
The other compounding issue with the buildings we do have and the space we do have, it is aging space. It's space that is sometimes inaccessible. Birch Street is not a handicap accessible building because you cannot go upstairs to access the thrift shop. Keith Henderson has some handicap accessibility, but it's not perfect and it's not convenient. For instance, if you're attending a program on the second floor, you may use the elevator, but if you need to use the restroom, you have to use the elevator to go back downstairs, even though there are bathrooms upstairs. But because of how the building has been designed, it's not accessible. Keith Anderson has been utilized for things like dance classes, karate style classes. It's good for those activities where we struggled with introducing more activities at the time to a younger age group. Is you can't really have active programming in there. You can't throw a ball. You can't have that more modal activities happen in there due to the floor to ceiling windows almost. And the downstairs space in Keith Anderson is at the moment very heavily utilized. The land trust is there, and currently adult education has taken up office space in there. So the Birch Street, comparatively, the kitchen space is a space that is valued by the public in terms of renting, in terms of using a kitchen space to provide different types of meals, different types of cooking style type of classes, but they're usually one-off and not necessarily rec hosted, but community used. Also, you can only have 45 people in that building at max fire capacity. That doesn't mean it's a fun 45 people. So using that space in a large way gets very cramped very quickly, for Birch Street specifically, if that helps for context.
I think it was mentioned we did do the town did a Haley Ward for the town did a facilities study on those buildings a few years ago and really like went into a lot more detail about some of the needs and issues. I did read that as part of the sort of prep for this chapter, and I would recommend, I think it's available right on the town's website, and maybe I linked it in one of the chapters for some additional context and detail. So in terms of sort of an issue and an opportunity, one of the main issues that I sort of just hinted at was, while the treatment plant itself has adequate capacity for lots more use, there are aging pipes and other infrastructure throughout the community that are needing upgrades. So in terms of the sewer department right now, the WPCF, their current revenue sources are user fees, connection fees for activities that end up requiring a permit. So if you weren't already connected, and then if you're a new development, they take an impact fee for developments that require the replacement or expansion of the system. Now, I do want to add that we've been talking a lot about how to essentially incentivize development. The impact fee right now is comparatively low for a number of other communities, and it really does not nearly cover the cost of required improvements in most cases. So like the WPCF can take that in, but until they get more development in a certain area with the impact fees to sort of offset that cost, they really can't make the necessary upgrades. So without increasing sort of the user fee on ratepayers, catching up on deferred maintenance is very difficult. Obviously, we have had the conversation that locating new development on public sewer is important in order to protect groundwater quality and quantity in rural areas, and because, of course, more dense development can be connected to public sewer than would be allowed under the state rules for septic systems. So we want to incentivize development that's on public sewer, but the town may wish and may need, frankly, to consider alternative funding sources for sewer upgrades. So when we did the economy chapter, we talked a little bit about the tax increment financing districts, and those do allow, in at least some cases, utilizing some of the funding that's sheltered from the state for sewer upgrades. Again, that's only in certain areas. It typically can't be used throughout the entirety of the community. And then occasionally we'll get a developer that their project would be big enough that it would warrant them deciding to expand sewer, and sort of rather than doing some sort of impact fee, doing a public-private partnership or a cost-sharing agreement where they're planning to pay that cost. That happens a lot more in larger communities where, you know, the development that's coming in is also much larger, but could be something that we consider in the future as well, rather than fully changing our impact fee calculation formula, which might end up having the opposite effect of actually discouraging development. But regardless, I think that the main issue there is that we do need funding for some deferred maintenance with some of our sewer lines. And I detailed a lot of the areas where we're currently having issues, and it's sort of the areas where we might want to incentivize development. So like up by the student apartment complexes is one of the main areas where there's a pretty big issue with this, just the size of the piping. It's undersized for the amount of flow that it's taking in during the school year. So we talked a little bit about the public safety building tonight. A variety of issues have obviously been documented with that building. Lack of space for expected staffing levels. So the fire department specifically is required by ordinance to have at least 5 people on staff. They're currently running 6 people on shift for the most part, just to respond to their call volume. The issue is that the building was really designed to only accommodate 4 firefighters sleeping at the facility. So there's sort of a lack of space for expected staffing levels, both at the fire department level, but also the police. They have documented potential structural issues, issues with the heating system, and then generally their space for like the storage of evidence isn't meeting current accreditation requirements and best practices. There were a number of other issues that I got from a memo from the previous fire chief that I summarized in the chapter as well for your knowledge. So we talked about the need for potentially in the future increased staffing levels there. They really can't accommodate what they have currently, and it's sort of posing a recruitment and retention issue for the town's fire department. Obviously staff, this kind of staff is highly sought after right now by municipalities, as was mentioned. So it becomes an issue, they can go somewhere else where there might be better accommodations for these folks that do have to sleep at the fire station at some level. And then obviously, I mentioned that we'll be prioritizing needed capital improvements in the form of recommendations in this plan in phase 3. I think that this is going to be one of the major considerations that will probably end up coming up again, unless there's some solution by a facilities working group in advance of that time. But I don't know that this is an issue that is necessarily going away, and we'll have to prioritize it with all of our other ideas and goals. That's what I have for public facilities, if anyone has questions there.
When was the police supply building built? I mean, to me, it was been here forever. It seems like it was 5 years ago, but I'm sure it's a lot longer than that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly the date it was built. If you give me a second, I can probably find out for you. It's been a while though.
Yeah, probably. I'm sure it's been a lot longer than I think it is.
I think it's the 90s, but
I was thinking the same thing, Dennis. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because Phil, we remember the Exxon station that set that.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
I think Mitch worked there.
I
think Mitch worked there.
Even in school.
Yeah, one other random thing, because we talked about sanitary sewer, but the stormwater issue, and one thing some communities are doing is they're looking at stormwater utilities, because if you treat you pay an electric bill, you pay a water bill, you pay a sanitary sewer bill, and some communities to deal with the current issues like the crazy storms we see nowadays, the intensity of rainstorms and the undersized infrastructure. There's the potential that stormwater is going to create headaches for the town of Orono and other communities all over the country in urbanized areas. So what they do is they actually assess a stormwater utility fee. You treat stormwater system just like you would any other utility, and people pay based on the amount of impervious area they have. So Bangor has one of these utilities. Portland does, Augusta, Lewiston. It's been tossed around, and some of the other regulated stormwater folks in this area. But, it might be an opportunity for Orono, in the future. It makes paying for stormwater system upkeep a little bit more equitable, because all the nonprofits would have to pay their fair share, whereas now taxpayers have to bear the brunt of that. I guess the downside of all this was that the university is the largest, encompasses about half of the town, so they would pay a really huge fee, and you wouldn't want to annoy them. Because they already kick in a bunch of money. But it's another issue and opportunity that wasn't necessarily stressed in the chapter, but I wanted folks to be aware of.
Isn't there already a program in place where we're taking all the stormwater drains and removing them from the public sanitation system? And where are we with that program?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Eric. So the whole point of, Orono is a regulated stormwater community, one of 30 in the state of Maine. And one of the initiatives as part of that permit program is to separate sewers. In Orono, I don't think we have any combined sewers. I don't work for the town of Orono, work for a lot of other communities, but my recollection is that all the Orono systems are separated. Brewer, for instance, has certain pipes in the city that are combined. You have sanitary and storm running in the same pipe system, same network. And basically, when it rains a lot, you have raw sewage basically having, you have discharges of that waterways, and that's no good for anybody. But Orono, I think, is separated most of our systems. So good question, but I think we're in pretty good shape. Is this more of just an upkeep of the sewer, of the draining system that we're talking about that? What I'm thinking about, Eric, is just, again, I'm in Plymouth, and flashing across the Olympic broadcast, was just talking about the intense rainstorms and road closures. And I mean, we've seen that. Remember what was it last year? What was it? Geez, it was before Christmas. Those culverts out on the Pushaw Road in Orono, small stream, just, it flash rain event, flooded those systems out, and it washed our road away. So those types of issues are going to become more common, given the types of rainfall that we see now, the intensity of rainstorms. And so it's just an issue to be aware of. Not, might not be as pressing as perhaps the sanitary upgrades and deferred maintenance, any of those kinds of things, but just wanted the committee to understand that stormwater is a forgotten utility at times. All right, any other questions? Do we have, unless we have public comment, it might be a good opportunity to jump back into recreation. Does that sound good? Unless we have facilities questions. All right, we good? Okay, I just want to touch on something that I just thought was interesting. We brought this up 10 years ago. And again, the availability of recreation spaces, so pocket parks, those kinds of things in neighborhoods, that was one of the points that we brought up. And Isabel mentions this in the chapter on recreation. Really, the only one we have is the ASA playground, but one of the initiatives, or one of the ideas we had 10 years ago was, we're looking for those opportunities or areas where you might be able to squeeze in more recreation, playgrounds for neighborhoods. And I think, Isabel, you mentioned Sklar Park was one of the proposed candidates, but those kinds of things are, again, it just allows Orono residents more opportunities, and with less travel to get to the ASA playground. So some of us have been fortunate enough. Mike, grew up in the Webster neighborhood. Our kids could walk over there. Eric, your kids you know, some people, if we're fortunate enough to live in town, it's pretty accessible. But, you know, like the Sailor development, you know, there's typically a lot of families there, kids and such. So that it's an interesting opportunity. But any discussion, Isabel or Dan, any conversation about, you know, this type of thing? Or Isabel, do you know anything more about the Sklar Park option you mentioned in the chapter?
I might ask you to speak to this a little bit more, but essentially, yeah. So to your point, back in the 2014 plan, it was identified as an issue that there was only one town-owned playground area. And you know, typically in communities, you'll have smaller playground areas that service neighborhoods so that you're not walking this far. When I believe when Mitch was the Parks and Recreation director, there was conversation about both Sklar Park and adding some sort of playground equipment or something further at Martin Park. And those were sort of two areas that are far enough away from sort of this area that's served by an existing park to serve those neighborhoods on those edges of town. I don't know if you can provide like an update on the conversation, but.
So the farthest we got, I don't have any plans that I've encountered in my time in the Parks and Rec department for the Sklar plan specifically. Martin got a little bit farther as there's some infrastructure issues at that park in general. There was a plan developed, I believe, between 2016 and 2018 to try and implement a walking track, another playground, at the time a skate park, in addition to the ball field that is already at Martin. Those plans ended at some point. I'm not sure why and I'm not sure how. I do have some renderings from like a concept idea, but I wasn't part of those conversations at the time, but people were interested enough that we went forth with some high level planning. In terms of capital investments, there has been capital suggestions to have a fund created for the new playground, wherever that may be. So it didn't go completely to the wayside from the 2014 plan, but there's not much tangible that I have for those things.
I thought I read there was $30,000 set aside for parks, but it hadn't been spent.
So it depends kind of what you're asking. We do have a reserve to update the existing playground. There was the start of a reserve to create a new playground. The trails systems have a reserve. So depending on, I would need to be more specific on where you read that or saw that, because we do have different pockets of money for different things or things that have started to be saved. There's a state park reserve. And I apologize if my language isn't perfect, whether it's a reserve or a budget or a capital plan. That I know sometimes the technicalities of finance I'm still getting used to, but there are different pockets of money for different things that do currently exist.
Yeah. So there is reserve funding. It hasn't been funded anytime recently, but there should be about 30,000 in there.
Yeah.
And it was geared to start a playground at Sklar Park.
It wasn't specific for any certain area. It's my understanding that it was because this need was identified in the plan for a neighborhood playgrounds. They started this reserve, but it probably hasn't been funded in 4 or 5 years, if not more.
Aaron, what was that group that you were?
Black Bear Skate Park, that one? That was the one that raised money specifically for a skate park.
But there was some talk at that point about putting in the pump track over at
Martin's Park.
Yeah. But where did that ever?
Well, just like Megan said, like the whole project just sort of stayed where it got to.
It would be kind of nice if they had something at Martin's, because that's the other side of town, basically.
It was a really nice plan. It used to be like on the wall right around here somewhere.
I still have the plan. I can before we leave tonight, I can run it up the stairs if you're interested in viewing it. But yeah, the Martin plan I thought it was really interesting, and it supported multi-generations of people. There was a thought at one point of putting kind of adult style outdoor exercise equipment at different corners of a track that would exist. There was some spaces in mind for additional parking on the Crosby Street side of the park to make it a little bit more accessible than parking up and down the road. And I know in the summertime, when the Little League is in, that's not really an issue because you are permitted to park on that side of Park Street. But if there were other things to do through the seasons in that space, having the forethought to add additional spaces would make sense there as well.
I guess it seems odd that we're sitting on $30,000 and there's needs. So
more than 30, because there's 30 plus the 10,000 or whatever it is for the skate park, plus other pockets too, I'm assuming.
So yes, part of for instance, the need of a playground. The playground we currently have is probably valued upwards of $500,000. So it's kind of hard to move forward with 30 when it doesn't get you very far. So the option then becomes, well, do we just want kind of a small swing set, or do we want the full plan of a playground? I think where it was dropped is we want a full plan. We want this grand idea, and to get there it takes longer than, say, adding something smaller, like just a swing set or just a something smaller.
So wait, you're budgeting to replace the $500,000 playground?
There's multiple streams there. There's a new playground potential line, if you will, and because this is already an existing piece of infrastructure, we have part of the capital plan to replace that because it won't last forever. So we have that plan already in place, regardless of the comp plan conversation here.
Dan, don't sit on money. That's my personal statement for the night.
Was Webster Park ever a consideration?
Let's planning more.
In terms of adding the playground to that space, Phil, not that I'm aware of. Webster Park does pose some challenges in terms of its layout. There's not really a nice. Martin Park is a great example of a nice flat spot where we wouldn't have to change the grade or do that sort of thing. That and anecdotally, I think people very much enjoy also having green spaces in their community. Webster Park is a very natural space, a very green space. People are able to move picnic tables and recreate there a lot differently than you do at a playground. So looking at Martin, where there's already existing similar infrastructure, that to me is a more attractive option, but that absolutely can be changed.
I think the town still owns the chunk of land where Webster School used to be.
Correct.
Yeah. And why don't we use, is there a restriction on that in terms of being for an educational use?
That's correct. So we do that. The parcel that we're referencing is in the Webster side neighborhood. At one point, there was a school building on that lot. And when the school no longer existed, it was deeded in a way that has to be used for an educational purpose. So we can't sell it for housing. We couldn't do that sort of thing because it needs to be used in a specific way.
You could get creative, make it an educational park.
Yeah, I was thinking
get creative. That's all you got to do.
Like an educational
center with housing on top.
Yeah.
What? That's what
it's a chunk of land when it's just there, grown over with bushes. Wasted space.
Centers are educational.
I mean, I drive by that Webster Park every day. Every day, and I think the town really underestimated when they redesigned the parking lot, changed the configuration. I believe it actually shrunk a bit from when it was a gravel lot, but that park is heavily used and every nice day. So all the esplanade, the grass strip going up North Main Avenue, because Eric and I both live up that way, and there's a lot of the grass strip is pretty much trash because there's just not enough parking spaces. It's really well utilized on most nice days. So that's unfortunate, but really great amenity in the town.
Well, so like low hanging fruit, Phil, to this point would be to take the what's it called, the Webster School?
Yep.
What was the school?
The Webster School lot you're referring to?
Yeah. But we couldn't just smooth that out with gravel and make it a parking area. Would that be permissible by the way it's deeded?
That's a very specific question. I would have to pull that deed and information, and if there are other entities involved, you have to check, like, for instance, if I'm speculating, but we have other properties in town that Land for Maine Futures are involved in, so sometimes you have to get permission from other entities to change use as well. So I'm not saying that's the case with that property. I don't have that deed in front of me, but it's information we can pull and see how specific it gets.
As we're kind of thinking about priorities, that might be a good conversation, like just being aware of all the town-owned land and what its restrictions might be. Just because I know that there's also been conversations about using land for housing, and now the recreation needs conversation. So yeah, having that would be helpful for our conversations going forward, and we can start pulling that together as staff.
It feels like the town needs to take more of, like, rather than a study approach, like get a doer to look at it, like have developers come in and assess things, not a study person to assess. Like, we're lacking like the action plans coming off of the studies that then you can prioritize.
Yeah, I think, like, kind of going a little bit back to transportation for a second, I think really when I was pulling that chapter together, I just realized how much stuff is really on the table. Like, you know, to that point, we have great planning. We just need the actual implementation steps. So I think a lot of our work, especially with transportation, will be like action step, action step, action step.
Timelines.
Yeah, like when will this be implemented? How will this be funded? Etc.
Or not, though, too. Like, it's okay to say we're a small town, we can't resource this stuff. But with that, like, in mind, sitting on money doesn't seem like a good idea, even if it's a small amount. Like, we're not going to be able to do it all. Like, it's very clear from our demographics and the limitations that we have. But that's why, like, let's not invest in the planning. Let's invest in the how do we actually get a few things done, because it's a morale boost for the entire community also.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
All right. It's 2 minutes of 8 o'clock. I think we probably gotta wrap things up here.
I just want to get these off my sheet regarding recreation. Yep. So Megan, one idea would be, like, we talked about all these, like karate, for instance, isn't offered through the recreation department, and there's other programming. But maybe the recreation department could just be like a one-stop shop for your own programming, and plus encourage others to advertise through there, so that anyone in the community that's looking for a program knows that they can go to the website and see everything that's there in one place. And it could be helpful to get the word out and kind of facilitate other people partnerships. Trail maps, I've been like, the communities have really lousy, not just Orono, but like it's just really difficult to figure out where trails are. Go, and it's like you gotta click on the park, and then you gotta click on a map of that park, and it's all like piecemealed. And so if there could just be one master catalog, here's all the trails in town, like an ArcGIS thing, that'd be really helpful. There's stuff on here that's green. It's like there's a trail now, Ayers Island. And then there's other stuff that's really old, and there's stuff that's missing. So I don't know where this map came from, but an accurate trail map would really, what's that?
This is the town's existing GIS map.
Oh, it's bad.
Yeah. And we were kind of aware of that just looking at it. Like, we don't have accurate information about where things currently exist.
And there's great opportunities out there to facilitate, to utilize an established foundation to do this on. We don't need to rewrite a whole new program to do it. In looking at those trails, I think it'd be the best thing that we could do is identify the trails, the rough trails, the ones that are not ADA accessible by any means, the ones that are difficult to ride a bike on, and target them for those. We've talked about this, I have at least. Like, how do we connect these dead ends using these trails? Some of them have been, like there's one that goes over to the Noise neighborhood that got paved a few years ago. The little trail through Martin Park got paved last year, I think it was. we just need more of those little connectors. Let's get more orange stripes on this map. So that we connect the dead ends using the trail network, and they're good for multi-purpose. So those are the three things I just wanted to bring up. That last one is the one I would feel most passionate about really establishing in our priority.
Great points, because we talked about last time, again, that proposed development that was off of Westwood behind there, that a really nice connector trail was proposed as part of that development, but unfortunately that went south. So yeah, great points.
The owner right now, the owner is proposing that again.
Okay, bring it on.
It's like, I think he's been talking to you, right?
Trey.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah, that should happen. This is the low hanging fruit.
Happening.
So in the conversations we've had the land trust has had conversations. I have had conversations, and we're actually working through what is best. Is it best the land trust manages an easement versus the town versus a project? So making sure that property owner is aware of all the options and what they mean is where we are with that conversation, which is excellent.
Well, one
But I
point
do think they want to develop some of the front.
Yeah.
Right. Well, one point though, I think that would be really important is that these need to be sidewalks. They need to be something that gets maintained year round. A nice gravel trail that stays covered in snow and slush for several months of the year doesn't help the community during those months at all. So something like the Martin Park connector or the one that goes to Noyes neighborhood that can be cleared like a sidewalk. That's really what the town needs for the connectivity.
Good points. All right. Do we have any public comment, Isabel? Anybody? Dan, you're the only public left.
No,
All right. Isabel, can you just give us a quick summary of what we're looking at? Geez, don't we meet next week?
Yeah, so just a reminder, we are meeting next week. I will have the packet out to you tomorrow morning. I just didn't want to do things. So we're meeting next week. We're reviewing natural and water resources, and then agriculture and forest. And Megan Hess, the town's environmental services manager, will be here to have a conversation with you all.
Great. Well, thanks again, everybody. Real good discussion. You can see we got a lot of work to do, but yeah, let's keep going. So we'll see you next week. I'll be in attendance in person, so see you then.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too.